Night settles gently over the quiet countryside of 19th century France. The fields grow still, the sky deepens into soft shades of blue, and the world begins to rest. Somewhere beyond the distant hills, a warm glow flickers from the window of a small laboratory, steady, unwavering, like a candle protecting a fragile hope. Inside, a man bends over his desk with calm concentration, his movements slow, thoughtful, unhurried. His name is Louis Pasteur, and though the world beyond remains unaware, he is beginning a journey that will one day protect millions of lives. In the dim light of his study, books lie open beside delicate glass flasks, their contents shimmering softly like captured starlight. The room is silent except for the faint ticking of a clock and the gentle scratch of a pen against paper. Pasteur's expression is peaceful, almost meditative. He studies the natural world not with urgency, but with quiet fascination. Every discovery he makes begins not as a demand for answers, but as an honest question whispered to the universe. Outside, the wind drifts through the streets of his small town, carrying the scent of night air and the distant sound of church bells. Life continues as it always has. Families gather for supper, farmers close their gates, doctors visit patients in dimly lit rooms. Illness is accepted as a part of life, a mystery without explanation. Few could imagine that a gentle, soft-spoken man working in near silence is about to change everything. In these early years, Pasteur finds beauty in simplicity, the swirl of a crystal under sunlight, the symmetry of chemical structures, the quiet logic behind nature's patterns. His mind moves gently through problems, searching not for glory, but for clarity. He studies deeply, listens carefully, and reflects patiently. Even now, the seeds of his greatest breakthroughs lie in the quiet calm of his curiosity. Beyond his walls, a world of unseen forces exists, tiny organisms that people cannot see, yet which shape their lives profoundly. At this moment, humanity does not know they exist, but Pasteur senses a hidden landscape waiting to be understood, a world invisible to the eye and essential to life. And so he works softly and steadily, guided by intuition and a belief that the smallest truths can hold the greatest meaning. Tonight, as he lifts a glass flask toward the lamplight, its faint glow reflects in his eyes. The room around him fades into shadow, leaving only the quiet pulse of discovery. This is where his journey begins, in stillness, in humility, and in the peaceful conviction that knowledge, patiently pursued, can transform the world. And in time, it will. In Pasteur's early years, the world around him moved with a slow, gentle rhythm defined by the quiet routines of rural France. He grew up surrounded by fields, soft breezes, and mornings filled with birdsong, each day shaped by simple patterns of life. His parents worked with steady humility, teaching him that patience and perseverance mattered more than ambition. In this peaceful environment, Pasteur began to cultivate a careful way of observing the world, one rooted in calm curiosity rather than urgency. As a child, he loved studying the subtle details of his surroundings. He spent long hours watching streams flow gently over smooth stones, noticing how patterns changed with the slightest movement of water. He sketched the world around him with a thoughtful hand, capturing shapes, reflections, and textures with quiet focus. These early drawings revealed a mind drawn not to noise or excitement, but to the hidden order within small moments. Through art, Pasteur discovered the beauty of close attention. Though he enjoyed solitude, Pasteur also found warmth in the steady routines of family life. Evenings were filled with soft conversation, the scent of warm meals, and gentle laughter shared in candlelit rooms. His parents encouraged him to explore his interests without pressure, giving him space to observe, reflect, and imagine. These moments planted within him a deep appreciation for both structure and stillness, qualities that would later guide his scientific approach with remarkable clarity. As he grew older, Pasteur's teachers noticed his thoughtful nature. He was not the type of student who rushed through lessons or sought attention for his ideas. Instead, he listened carefully, taking time to understand each concept before moving forward. His calm diligence set him apart, revealing a mind that preferred depth over speed. Teachers encouraged him to continue studying, sensing that his quiet persistence held great potential. In his teenage years, Pasteur faced the first decisions about his future, choices that carried weight but did not trouble him. He approached them the same way he approached all things, slowly, thoughtfully, with a calm desire for understanding. Chemistry began to draw his interest, not because of dramatic experiments, but because of the delicate patterns hidden within reactions. Pasteur saw in chemistry the same structural beauty he once studied through drawing, and this connection resonated deeply within him. Yet even as he leaned towards science, Pasteur remained grounded in his love for art. He continued to sketch portraits of those around him, capturing their expressions with sensitivity and care. These drawings showed not only technical skill, but an ability to observe emotion, personality, and the subtle language of the face. Through art, he learned the value of noticing what others overlooked, an ability that would later allow him to see patterns in nature that were invisible to most. By the time Pasteur reached adulthood, he had developed a calm, reflective approach to life that shaped every decision he made. He pursued knowledge with gentle purpose, never rushing, never forcing understanding before its time. This quiet mindset allowed him to absorb information deeply, turning each insight into a stepping stone for future discovery. Pasteur sensed that his path lay not in chasing recognition, but in following the quiet pull of curiosity. And so, with steady intention, he stepped into the next stage of his education, unaware that his calm way of seeing the world would one day lead him to discoveries that would transform medicine, save lives, and illuminate an invisible world hidden just beneath the surface. As Pasteur continued his studies, he discovered that learning brought him a deep and quiet satisfaction. He was drawn not to the excitement of quick results, but to the slow unfolding of understanding. Each new idea felt like opening a small window into a larger world, revealing hidden relationships and delicate structures. He approached each lesson with the same calm intention that had guided his drawings, observing patiently, absorbing fully, and reflecting before moving on. His growing interest in chemistry developed gently, rooted in his admiration for the balance and harmony within natural processes. Pasteur noticed that even the simplest reactions carried a kind of elegance, shaped by invisible rules that connected one event to the next. He felt a peaceful fascination watching solutions change color, crystals form, or compounds settle into new shapes. These small transformations mirrored the quiet beauty he had always found in nature, awakening a desire to understand the secrets behind them. During his time at school, Pasteur encountered challenges that tested his patience, yet he approached them with steady resilience. Subjects that came easily to others sometimes required extra time and reflection for him, but he never felt discouraged. Instead, he moved through difficulties with calm determination, trusting that careful study would eventually bring clarity. This gentle persistence became one of his defining strengths, a foundation that would support him in the years ahead. As he advanced in his education, Pasteur discovered mentors who recognized the thoughtful depth of his mind. They encouraged him to pursue scientific research, sensing that his patience and careful observation made him well-suited for a life in the laboratory. Their guidance strengthened his confidence, helping him see that his quiet nature was not a limitation, but an asset. With each conversation, Pasteur felt the path before him becoming clearer, shaped by a sense of purpose that grew steadily within him. Outside of his academic work, Pasteur continued to find comfort in sketching the world around him. His art evolved into a private sanctuary, a place where he could rest his thoughts and reconnect with the quiet beauty that first taught him to observe carefully. These drawings remained a peaceful balance to the discipline of chemistry, reminding him that both art and science grew from the same root, the desire to understand the world through attentive eyes. By the time Pasteur approached the end of his early schooling, he carried with him a calm mixture of curiosity and readiness. He had developed habits of careful thought, gentle persistence, and quiet observation that shaped every part of his learning. These qualities prepared him not only for scientific discovery, but for the deeper insights that lay hidden behind the mysteries of life. Pasteur felt a soft anticipation for what lay ahead, trusting that each step would reveal more of the invisible world waiting to be understood. And with this quiet confidence, he prepared to enter the next stage of his journey, one where the questions he asked would lead him beyond the familiar into the deeper, unseen forces that shaped health, illness, and the delicate balance of nature. As Pasteur entered the next phase of his education, he found himself immersed in an environment filled with new ideas, possibilities, and challenges. His days unfolded within lecture halls that echoed with quiet footsteps and the low hum of discussion, each room offering a different window into the world of science. Pasteur approached these experiences with calm focus, absorbing each lesson with deliberate attention. He felt himself expanding gently, as though each new concept added another layer to his understanding of the natural world. Chemistry, in particular, continued to draw him with increasing depth. He became fascinated by the delicate architecture of molecules and the hidden forces that shaped their behavior. Pasteur saw patterns where others saw complexity, subtle relationships between elements, quiet harmonies within reactions. Working with careful hands, he learned how small changes in structure could alter entire outcomes, strengthening his appreciation for the precision that scientific study required. This combination of patience and curiosity guided him naturally toward laboratory work. Within the lab, Pasteur found a sense of peace that mirrored his earliest experiences with drawing. The soft clink of glassware, the gentle swirl of liquids, and the quiet glow of lamplight created an atmosphere that felt comforting and familiar. He enjoyed the slow pace of experimentation, where progress unfolded through steady observation rather than hurried conclusions. Each small result felt meaningful, providing another piece of a puzzle he was eager to understand. His professors noticed the calm dedication he brought into every assignment. Unlike students who rushed to finish tasks quickly, Pasteur worked steadily, ensuring that each measurement was exact and each method carefully followed. They saw in him a young scientist who valued accuracy over speed, someone who understood that reliable conclusions were built on disciplined practice. Their encouragement helped Pasteur find confidence in his approach, reinforcing the idea that his quiet strengths were essential qualities in scientific work. Outside the laboratory, Pasteur continued exploring the world through long walks across campus and through nearby fields. These peaceful moments allowed him to reflect on the concepts he had learned, sorting them gently in his mind until they formed a clear picture. He noticed how natural processes echoed the structures he studied in class: the symmetry of leaves, the patterns of frost, the gentle unfolding of petals. These parallels deepened his belief that science and nature were inseparable, each offering insight into the other. As the academic year progressed, Pasteur began assisting in small research assignments, contributing careful observations that supported larger studies. He approached each task with the calm thoroughness that had become his signature, appreciating the opportunity to participate in work that extended beyond the classroom. These early experiences revealed to him how collaboration enriched discovery, allowing insights to grow through shared effort. Pasteur valued these partnerships, feeling supported by mentors who recognized his potential. During quiet evenings, he often studied alone by candlelight, reviewing notes with thoughtful patience. The shadows around him shifted softly, the flame flickering, as though echoing his steady determination. Pasteur encountered challenges, of course, moments when results didn't make sense, or when theories felt distant and difficult. But he approached these uncertainties gently, trusting that clarity would arrive in time. His calm persistence allowed him to navigate confusion without discouragement. By the time he completed this phase of his studies, Pasteur had developed a strong foundation in scientific reasoning. He felt himself moving toward a deeper level of inquiry, one that required not only knowledge, but the ability to see beyond the surface of a problem. His growing curiosity pointed him toward the invisible structures of life, urging him to look closer, think deeper, and question what others accepted without hesitation. This quiet sense of purpose guided him forward, and with that quiet purpose, Pasteur stepped into the next chapter of his scientific journey, one that would bring him closer to the intricate, unseen world that lay at the heart of his greatest discoveries. As Pasteur advanced in his studies, he found himself drawn toward questions that touched the deeper structures of matter. His interest in crystallography began quietly, sparked by a simple observation of how light refracted through a carefully cut crystal. He noticed that crystals possessed a kind of hidden symmetry, an internal order that felt both mysterious and logical. This delicate harmony resonated with the same calm curiosity that had guided him since childhood, encouraging him to explore the unseen architecture within solid forms. Under the guidance of experienced professors, Pasteur embarked on studies that required close attention to shape, structure, and geometric arrangement. He examined crystals under different wavelengths of light, watching how their surfaces responded with gentle flashes and shifting colors. Each observation offered a quiet clue about their internal composition. Pasteur found satisfaction in these small discoveries, appreciating how nature expressed its laws with subtlety rather than noise. His patience allowed him to see patterns others often overlooked. As he worked, he encountered a puzzling phenomenon involving crystals that appeared similar but behaved differently when exposed to polarized light. This inconsistency captured his attention completely. Pasteur sensed that the answer lay not in the obvious, but in the small details hidden within the structure. He began studying the crystals with heightened focus, turning them carefully beneath light sources, comparing shapes, angles, and reflections. The process was slow, yet deeply calming, each moment of stillness offering another insight. Through these deliberate observations, Pasteur noticed that one set of crystals possessed a slight asymmetry that the other lacked, a subtle, almost imperceptible difference. This discovery sparked a gentle sense of excitement within him. The asymmetry revealed that nature's architecture extended beyond visible shapes into the realm of molecular structure. Pasteur understood that even the smallest deviation could produce significant changes in behavior. This realization deepened his fascination with the hidden order of matter. Sharing his findings with mentors, Pasteur spoke in quiet, thoughtful tones, describing what he had observed and how the two crystal types differed. His professors recognized the significance of his discovery, praising his careful approach and keen perception. Their encouragement strengthened Pasteur's confidence, confirming that his ability to notice subtle differences was not only valuable, but essential in scientific research. He carried this affirmation gently, allowing it to support him without altering his humble nature. As he continued studying asymmetry in molecular structures, Pasteur began developing theories that connected these observations to broader natural processes. He considered how molecular shapes influenced chemical reactions, biological behaviors, and even the foundations of life itself. These reflections stirred within him a sense of quiet wonder. He realized that understanding the smallest structures could illuminate mysteries on a much larger scale. This perspective shaped his emerging identity as a scientist who sought not just answers, but deeper coherence. Despite the complexity of his work, Pasteur maintained a calm rhythm in his daily routine. He balanced long hours in the laboratory with peaceful walks across campus, allowing his mind to settle as he observed the natural world around him. These simple moments helped him process difficult ideas without tension. Pasteur believed that clarity often emerged in silence, and he allowed himself the time to think without pressure. This balance became a guiding principle throughout his life. As his research progressed, Pasteur earned respect among students and professors alike. They admired not only his discoveries, but the gentle steadiness with which he approached each challenge. He was never hurried, never careless, always attentive to detail. His calm presence made him a trustworthy collaborator, and many sought his insights during discussions. These relationships helped him recognize that scientific progress was not a solitary pursuit, but a shared journey enriched by many perspectives. By the end of this phase, Pasteur had established himself as a rising thinker with an uncommon gift for seeing beneath the surface of problems. The discoveries he made in crystallography would later guide him toward larger questions about fermentation, disease, and the invisible organisms that influenced human life. Though he did not yet know it, the principles of asymmetry he uncovered would eventually lead him into the foundations of microbiology. And so, with a quiet sense of readiness, Pasteur prepared to step into the next stage of his scientific path, one that would bring him closer to the mysteries that would define his greatest contributions to the world. As Pasteur completed his early research in crystallography, he found himself standing at the edge of new scientific questions that felt larger, deeper, and more connected to life itself. His discoveries had shown him that the smallest structures carried meaning far beyond their size. This realization stirred a quiet curiosity within him, an intuition that the mysteries of chemistry might overlap with the living world in ways few had considered. He felt drawn toward these intersections, guided by a gentle desire to understand nature from the inside out. During this time, Pasteur accepted a new academic position that offered both teaching responsibilities and space for independent research. He approached these duties with his usual calm dedication, speaking to students with clarity and patience. His lectures were never dramatic. Instead, they unfolded slowly, like carefully arranged steps, meant to bring students into deeper understanding. Many admired the thoughtful way he explained complex ideas, sensing the sincerity behind each lesson. Pasteur viewed teaching as another way to observe, to see how minds engaged with the structures of science. As he settled into his new environment, Pasteur began exploring questions related to fermentation, a topic that had long puzzled chemists. Many believed fermentation was simply a chemical reaction that occurred without life, but Pasteur felt a gentle doubt toward this assumption. Something about the process felt alive, as though invisible agents were quietly shaping each transformation. This subtle intuition inspired him to approach fermentation not as a closed phenomenon, but as a living puzzle waiting to be understood. Pasteur set up his laboratory with the same careful attention he brought to every aspect of his work. Glass flasks lined the shelves, each one meticulously cleaned, prepared, and labeled. The soft scent of warmed broth and dissolved sugars filled the room as he prepared solutions for his experiments. He felt a familiar peace settle over him as he arranged the equipment, appreciating the quiet order of the workspace. In this calm environment, curiosity could move freely without pressure. To investigate fermentation, Pasteur began examining the residues and sediments left behind during the process. He studied them under a microscope, adjusting the lens with delicate precision. What he observed surprised him. Tiny, living structures moving gently within the liquid. These microorganisms, small enough to remain unseen by the naked eye, revealed themselves through slow, rhythmic motions. Pasteur felt a quiet thrill watching them, sensing that he had stepped into an entirely new world. These observations led him to suspect that fermentation was not merely a chemical event, but a biological one. The idea challenged prevailing beliefs, yet Pasteur approached it with the same calm confidence that guided all his discoveries. He continued studying the microorganisms, comparing their movements, shapes, and behaviors in different conditions. Each careful observation strengthened the connection between life and transformation. Pasteur realized he had uncovered a hidden layer of nature, one that suggested life existed at scales previously unimaginable. Colleagues who visited Pasteur's lab noticed his peaceful but unwavering focus. He explained his findings in gentle tones, inviting them to look through the microscope and see what he had seen. Some reacted with skepticism, while others were quietly fascinated. Pasteur did not push his conclusions. Instead, he allowed the evidence to speak for itself. He believed that true understanding emerged not from debate, but from attentive observation. As he continued his research, Pasteur designed experiments to test whether these microorganisms were responsible for chemical transformations. He sealed some flasks, boiled others, and exposed still others to open air. Each test was performed with careful precision, allowing the results to shape his understanding without forcing conclusions. He discovered that fermentation occurred only when living microorganisms were present. Without them, the reaction failed to appear. This revelation brought him closer to a truth that would reshape the scientific world. By the end of this early stage, Pasteur believed he had uncovered the beginnings of a new principle. Life-influenced processes, once thought purely chemical. He sensed that these microorganisms played roles not only in fermentation, but possibly in illness and decay. This idea felt both vast and delicate, like holding a fragile insight that could easily be misunderstood. Pasteur knew he needed to move slowly, allowing each piece of evidence to form a stable foundation. And with gentle determination, he prepared to explore the next layer of the invisible world, one that would lead him toward discoveries that would protect countless lives and transform the foundations of medicine. As Pasteur deepened his study of fermentation, the invisible world he observed under the microscope began to reveal patterns that shaped his thinking. He noticed that each type of fermentation, whether producing alcohol, lactic acid, or vinegar, was accompanied by a different kind of microorganism. Their shapes varied, their motions differed, and their presence seemed tied directly to the nature of the transformation taking place. These subtle distinctions strengthened his belief that life, in its tiniest forms, played a crucial role in chemical change. To understand these microorganisms more fully, Pasteur designed experiments that isolated each type of fermentation. He cultivated yeast in carefully prepared solutions, observing how it broke down sugars with quiet, methodical efficiency. Under the microscope, he watched tiny cells bud and multiply, forming clusters that drifted gently through the liquid. The calm, almost rhythmic movements of the organisms seemed to echo the slow unfolding of his own discoveries. Pasteur approached these observations with gratitude, sensing that nature was revealing its secrets one small piece at a time. He expanded his studies to include souring milk, rancid butter, and spoiling broths, common phenomena that people considered natural but poorly understood. Pasteur examined each sample with the same careful approach, searching for microorganisms that might explain the changes in smell, texture, and flavor. Time and again, he found that each transformation corresponded with the presence of a specific microscopic life form. These findings quietly challenged long-held beliefs that such processes occurred spontaneously, without cause or intention. As Pasteur's ideas developed, he began to articulate a new theory, that life arose only from life, and that microorganisms came from existing organisms rather than forming spontaneously. This concept, known as biogenesis, contradicted the widely accepted idea of spontaneous generation. Many scientists resisted the notion, finding it difficult to accept that tiny unseen beings governed processes they had long attributed to chemistry alone. Pasteur approached the controversy with calm resilience, trusting the clarity of his observations over the noise of disagreement. To test his theory, Pasteur prepared broths in flasks with long, curved necks designed to trap dust particles and microorganisms while allowing air to enter. He boiled the broths to sterilize them and then left the flasks undisturbed. Days passed, then weeks, yet the broths remained clear and unchanged. Microorganisms never appeared unless the flasks were tilted or opened, allowing dust to reach the liquid. These simple but elegant experiments provided powerful evidence that life did not arise spontaneously. Pasteur's calm, methodical approach had illuminated a truth that reshaped scientific understanding. When Pasteur presented these findings, he did so with quiet conviction, avoiding dramatic language and focusing on the careful reasoning behind each step. Some colleagues remained skeptical, but many were persuaded by the undeniable clarity of his experiments. He emphasized that science moved forward not through argument, but through observation and evidence that could be reproduced. This gentle insistence on clarity helped shift the scientific community toward a new understanding of the invisible forces shaping everyday life. Pasteur's discoveries in microbiology soon began influencing his thoughts on health and disease. If tiny organisms could transform food and liquids, he wondered, might they also play a role in illness? The idea was subtle yet profound, hinting at a hidden world that shaped human well-being. Pasteur approached this possibility with the same calm curiosity that had guided him through crystallography and fermentation. He sensed that he was stepping into territory that would require patience, precision, and unwavering care. Throughout this period, his laboratory became a quiet sanctuary where the unknown gradually took shape. The gentle glow of lamplight illuminated rows of flasks, their contents slowly changing under the watchful presence of microscopic life. Pasteur moved through the room with calm purpose, adjusting instruments, recording observations, and reflecting on the deeper implications of his findings. Each discovery felt like a whisper from nature, a small, delicate truth that would one day grow into a groundbreaking understanding. By the end of this phase, Pasteur had begun forming the principles that would lead him toward germ theory, a concept that would transform medicine and save countless lives. Though he did not yet know the full extent of what lay ahead, he sensed that the invisible world he studied held answers to mysteries long considered unsolvable. With quiet determination, he prepared to follow this path wherever it led. And as he stepped into the next chapter of his work, Pasteur carried with him the calm certainty that patience, observation, and gentle curiosity were the keys to unlocking the truths hidden beneath the surface of life. As Pasteur's discoveries about microorganisms gained clarity, he turned his attention to a phenomenon that puzzled farmers, brewers, and scientists alike: the unpredictable spoilage of wine and beer. These losses carried economic consequences, yet no one understood why certain batches spoiled while others remained perfectly preserved. Pasteur sensed that the answer might lie within the invisible world he had come to understand so deeply. With calm determination, he began examining the processes behind fermentation more closely, searching for the delicate boundary between preservation and decay. His early investigations revealed a quiet pattern. Healthy fermentation occurred when specific microorganisms were present, guiding the conversion of sugars with rhythmic precision. Spoilage, however, appeared when different organisms invaded the process, tiny intruders that disrupted the delicate balance. Pasteur observed these changes under the microscope with thoughtful concentration, watching spoilage bacteria move gently through the liquid. Their presence shifted the reaction in subtle but powerful ways. turning sweetness into sourness and clarity into cloudiness. To test his theory, Pasteur conducted careful experiments comparing fresh, well-fermented wine to batches that had spoiled. He analyzed their microorganisms, temperature conditions, and exposures to air. Slowly, the connections revealed themselves. When harmful microbes entered the wine, the process veered away from its intended path. This discovery confirmed that spoilage did not arise from chance or spontaneous events. Instead, it resulted from tiny living agents that entered the liquid through contact with air, equipment, or unclean storage. As he refined his understanding, Pasteur began exploring ways to prevent these harmful organisms from disrupting the fermentation process. He experimented with heating the wine gently, observing how the heat affected microbial life. He discovered that warming wine to a specific temperature killed the spoilage organisms without altering the drink itself. This method, simple yet transformative, offered a way to preserve wine with consistency. Pasteur recognized the quiet power of this discovery, though he introduced it with the same calm humility that guided all his work. When he shared the technique with winemakers, many listened with cautious curiosity. Pasteur explained the method clearly, emphasizing the role of microorganisms and the value of gentle heat in controlling them. As winemakers tested the process, they found that their wines remained stable and free of spoilage. Pasteur's discovery became a quiet revolution in the industry, protecting livelihoods and bringing a sense of reliability to a craft often vulnerable to unseen forces. His simple method would later become known as pasteurization, though he did not seek fame from it. Encouraged by this success, Pasteur expanded his studies to include beer, a drink facing similar challenges with spoilage and inconsistency. He observed the brewing process with the same steady patience he applied to all experiments, identifying the microorganisms responsible for healthy fermentation and those that caused unwanted changes. Through gentle heating and careful hygiene, he demonstrated that brewers could protect their work from contamination. These findings spread quietly across industries, strengthening the connection between science and daily life. Throughout this period, Pasteur's laboratory remained a place of calm exploration. Rows of flasks, fermentation vessels, and microscopes lined the shelves, each one part of a larger story, unfolding slowly through his careful attention. His experiments progressed not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through patient observation and steady refinement. Pasteur believed that science favored those who listened closely, and he allowed each result to guide him forward with quiet clarity. By this time, his reputation as a thoughtful and meticulous scientist began to grow. People admired his ability to translate complex ideas into simple, practical solutions. Yet Pasteur remained grounded, devoting himself to the work rather than the praise. He knew that his discoveries represented only the beginning of a deeper understanding, one that suggested microorganisms shaped far more than fermentation. The invisible world he studied held implications that reached into health, illness, and the very fabric of life. And as he prepared to follow this path further, Pasteur felt a calm sense of purpose settle within him. His discoveries had brought clarity to fields once ruled by uncertainty. Now they were guiding him toward a set of questions whose answers would transform medicine and protect countless lives. Pasteur's work with fermentation soon began to reveal parallels with broader natural processes. He noticed that microorganisms behaved with remarkable consistency. They grew, reproduced, and interacted with their environment in ways that suggested deeper biological rules. This observation encouraged him to think beyond wine and beer, to consider whether these invisible agents might also shape the health of animals and humans. Pasteur approached this idea with gentle caution, aware that such a question carried immense significance. To explore his growing hypothesis, he examined decay in organic materials, studying how microbes appeared in spoiled foods, stagnant water, and substances left exposed to air. Under the microscope, he saw the same patterns he had observed in fermentation, microorganisms thriving in environments that allowed contamination, yet absent in conditions that remained sealed and sterile. These parallels strengthened his belief that life's smallest forms exerted quiet but powerful influence over the physical world. Each observation pushed him further along the path toward germ theory. Pasteur shared his developing thoughts with trusted colleagues, presenting them not as bold declarations, but as gentle possibilities. He explained how microorganisms behaved predictably, how they followed patterns, and how they seemed capable of causing both beneficial and harmful transformations. Some colleagues listened with interest, sensing the potential hidden within his ideas. Others remained hesitant, unsure how such tiny beings could affect larger systems. Pasteur accepted their doubts with calm understanding, believing that evidence, not argument, would ultimately illuminate truth. As he expanded his work, Pasteur designed new experiments aimed at understanding how microorganisms traveled from place to place. He studied dust particles, droplets of water, and surfaces that touched organic materials. These experiments revealed that microbes moved quietly through the environment, on tools, in air, and along pathways invisible to the naked eye. Pasteur realized that cleanliness and careful control were essential in preventing unwanted contamination. This insight would soon become one of the cornerstones of modern sanitation. During this time, he worked closely with students and assistants who helped maintain the laboratory. They cleaned flasks, prepared solutions, and observed results under his guidance. Pasteur spoke to them with patience, encouraging careful technique and thoughtful interpretation. He explained that scientific discovery depended not on speed but on precision and consistency. His calm presence created an environment of quiet discipline, where each movement and measurement carried importance. As his understanding deepened, Pasteur began seeing microorganisms not merely as agents of fermentation, but as participants in a larger web of life. He recognized that they could nourish, transform, preserve, or destroy, depending on their nature and environment. This realization opened a profound question in his mind. If microbes could spoil food and affect fermentation, could they also influence diseases that affected humans and animals? The idea lingered gently, growing louder with each new observation. In public lectures, Pasteur presented his findings with clarity and humility. He described microorganisms as invisible workers, shaping processes that people had long misunderstood. His explanations were calm and deliberate, allowing listeners to absorb the concepts without feeling overwhelmed. Many left these lectures with a new sense of wonder, now aware that an unseen world thrived around them. Pasteur felt encouraged by their curiosity, sensing that understanding was spreading slowly but steadily. Despite the progress, resistance within parts of the scientific community persisted. Some researchers clung to the idea of spontaneous generation, unable to accept that microorganisms came from existing life. Pasteur responded not with frustration, but with renewed dedication to clarity. He believed that the truth deserved patient defense. Every experiment he conducted strengthened his confidence that life did not arise from inert matter, but followed its own consistent patterns. By the end of this stage, Pasteur's research had expanded far beyond its original focus. What began as an investigation into fermentation had evolved into a broader exploration of life's hidden structures. His experiments pointed toward a world of microorganisms that shaped health, decay, and transformation. The path ahead was becoming clearer, revealing the connection between the smallest forms of life and the grandest questions of human well-being. And as he prepared to follow this connection into deeper territory, Pasteur felt a quiet determination settle within him. The discoveries he pursued were not driven by ambition, but by the calm belief that understanding the invisible could help protect the visible world. As Pasteur's ideas about microorganisms gained strength, he began turning his attention to the practical problems affecting farmers across France. Many communities relied heavily on livestock, yet diseases spread unpredictably through herds, leaving families anxious and uncertain. Pasteur noticed that these outbreaks shared an unsettling pattern: sudden onset, rapid spread, and little understanding of the cause. He sensed that the same invisible agents responsible for fermentation and spoilage might also influence the health of animals. This emerging thought carried both urgency and quiet purpose. Pasteur approached this new field with the same gentle curiosity that guided his earlier work. He visited farms, spoke with veterinarians, and observed the symptoms that marked each disease. The landscape around him was peaceful: rolling fields, soft breezes, and animals grazing calmly, yet beneath the surface existed an unease that families had lived with for generations. Pasteur absorbed these surroundings carefully, feeling a growing responsibility to uncover the truth hidden within the quiet rhythms of farm life. Among the illnesses he studied, one stood out for its severity: a disease known as anthrax, which struck sheep and cattle with frightening speed. Farmers described healthy animals collapsing within hours, leaving entire herds vulnerable. Pasteur examined samples taken from sick animals under his microscope, searching for patterns or organisms that might offer clues. He found a consistent presence: tiny rod-shaped bacteria that appeared only in the infected blood. Their quiet persistence suggested a deeper role in the disease's spread. To understand these microorganisms more clearly, Pasteur recreated conditions in his laboratory that resembled those found in affected animals. He watched as the bacteria grew, multiplied, and formed spores capable of surviving harsh environments. These spores fascinated him. They remained still and dormant, yet capable of awakening when conditions became favorable. Pasteur realized that anthrax spread not through air or spontaneous formation, but through these resilient spores carried in soil, water, and infected remains. This discovery offered a new way to understand the disease, but Pasteur approached the implications with gentle caution. He knew that challenging long-held beliefs required not loud declarations, but careful demonstration. He designed experiments that traced the disease's transmission step by step, showing how spores could remain in pastures for years, waiting to infect new animals. Each experiment was performed with thoughtful precision, revealing a quiet but powerful pattern that linked microorganisms directly to illness. When Pasteur shared his findings with veterinarians and government officials, he spoke calmly and clearly, explaining each observation in simple, transparent terms. Some listeners were skeptical, unsure how being so small could cause such devastating sickness. Others felt relieved to finally see a possible explanation for the suffering that had troubled their communities. Pasteur welcomed both reactions, believing that true understanding would emerge gradually, shaped by evidence rather than persuasion. As he continued studying anthrax, Pasteur began considering whether the same principles he observed in fermentation could apply to disease prevention. If microorganisms caused illness, perhaps they could be weakened, controlled, or even prevented from entering the body. This idea remained delicate, forming quietly in his thoughts, like a seed waiting for the right moment to grow. He sensed that the invisible world he had awakened to held answers that could protect not only wine and food, but entire communities. In his laboratory, Pasteur moved slowly between workstations, adjusting instruments and preparing new cultures. The soft glow of lamplight illuminated the tools of his research: flasks, glass slides, and sealed containers that held samples of the microorganisms he studied. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of paper or the quiet tap of glass. Pasteur felt comfort in the steadiness of these moments, aware that each careful action carried the possibility of greater understanding. His growing certainty about microorganisms influencing disease began to shift the way he viewed the world. Fields he once saw as peaceful landscapes now appeared as living ecosystems filled with activity invisible to the naked eye. Streams, soil, and even air contained microscopic travelers shaping the health of animals and humans. This realization did not frighten him. Instead, it filled him with a sense of calm responsibility. Understanding life's smallest structures meant gaining the ability to protect life's larger forms. By the end of this stage, Pasteur found his path becoming clearer. The invisible world that shaped fermentation also shaped illness. The microorganisms he observed under his microscope held the key to predicting, preventing, and controlling diseases that had plagued communities for centuries. With quiet resolve, Pasteur prepared to explore this connection further, stepping into a new realm of research that would change the course of medical history. As Pasteur continued his research into anthrax, he refined his understanding of how the disease moved quietly through farms and villages. He saw that outbreaks followed patterns tied to weather, soil conditions, and the burial sites of infected animals. These observations reinforced the idea that anthrax spores lingered in the earth, waiting patiently for the right moment to reawaken. Pasteur felt a calm determination rise within him. If he could understand how spores lived and died, he believed he could interrupt the cycle of illness. To test this idea, Pasteur performed careful heating experiments similar to those he had used in fermentation studies. He exposed anthrax bacteria to controlled temperatures, observing how heat weakened or destroyed them. Under his microscope, he watched as once active organisms slowed, faded, and eventually disappeared. These small changes carried enormous meaning. They suggested that heat, when applied with precision, could break the chain of infection. Pasteur approached this discovery with quiet reverence, sensing its significance even before others recognized it. Encouraged by these results, Pasteur began exploring whether weakened microorganisms could be used to protect animals rather than harm them. It was a delicate thought, one that required cautious experimentation and deep respect for the lives affected. He hypothesized that exposing animals to a gentler form of the bacteria might train their bodies to resist the stronger, deadly form. This was an idea without precedent, yet Pasteur followed it with the same calm intuition that guided all his work. He sensed he was standing at the threshold of something transformative. Working with skilled assistants, Pasteur prepared weakened cultures of anthrax, carefully adjusting conditions to reduce the bacteria's strength without eliminating them entirely. The process required steadiness, each adjustment subtle, each observation precise. When the preparations were complete, he selected animals for testing, ensuring they were well cared for and closely monitored. Pasteur approached the trials with both scientific clarity and personal compassion, understanding the weight of what he was attempting. The early tests revealed promising results. Animals exposed to the weakened culture remained healthy, even when later introduced to the strong, deadly bacteria. Their survival suggested that the body possessed a natural defense mechanism that could be awakened through controlled exposure. Pasteur felt a quiet sense of awe watching these outcomes. The idea that illness could be prevented, not just treated, opened a path he had long hoped to find. He moved forward cautiously, refining the method with gentle persistence. Word of Pasteur's experiments spread slowly among farmers and veterinarians, many of whom had suffered for years under the unpredictable devastation of anthrax. They listened to Pasteur's early explanations with a mixture of hope and hesitation. Some feared the idea of introducing bacteria deliberately, while others felt relief that someone was finally addressing the problem with care and understanding. Pasteur met their concerns with calm assurance, explaining each step with patience and humility. As Pasteur prepared for a more public demonstration of his method, he chose to proceed only after repeated, reliable results. He believed that scientific progress should never rely on luck or spectacle, but on consistency and evidence. His team conducted trial after trial, each one confirming the same quiet truth. Controlled exposure allowed animals to develop resistance. Pasteur documented these findings carefully, ensuring that every detail could be understood and repeated by others. During this period, Pasteur found himself reflecting more deeply on the relationship between science and responsibility. He understood that his discoveries could protect countless lives, yet he also recognized the need for caution, transparency, and respect. The calm nature of his work served as his anchor. He believed that science carried a moral weight, and that progress must be guided not by ambition, but by the steady desire to help others. By the time Pasteur felt ready to present his findings, he carried with him a sense of quiet confidence grounded in years of careful observation. He knew that his work had the potential to reshape the way people understood disease, offering hope where there had once been fear. Though he remained humble, he sensed that a new chapter in medicine was beginning, one in which prevention would become as essential as treatment. And with this gentle conviction, Pasteur prepared to demonstrate the power of his discovery to the world, unaware that his method would one day save millions of lives and become one of the cornerstones of modern science. Pasteur's work reached a pivotal moment when he prepared to demonstrate his anthrax vaccine to the public. The demonstration was planned for the farming village of Pouilly-le-Fort, where outbreaks had long frightened livestock owners. The event drew scientists, farmers, and government officials, all curious yet cautious about Pasteur's claims. Despite the weight of expectation, Pasteur approached the moment with calm steadiness. He believed in the gentle logic of his experiments and trusted the quiet consistency of his observations. The plan involved two groups of animals, one vaccinated with Pasteur's weakened anthrax culture, and one left unprotected. Both groups grazed side by side in the same fields, cared for under identical conditions. Pasteur watched over the preparations with patient attention, ensuring every detail was precise. He understood that the success of the demonstration relied not on spectacle, but on the steady reliability of nature responding to his methods. His confidence remained quiet, grounded in the clarity of the science. As the day of challenge approached, the atmosphere in the village shifted. Farmers visited the animals regularly, studying their health with both hope and doubt. The vaccinated animals appeared calm and strong, while the unvaccinated group looked equally healthy for the moment. Pasteur remained composed, knowing that the true test would reveal itself only after exposure. He moved gently through the fields, observing the livestock with a sense of responsibility rather than anticipation. When the time came, both groups were exposed to the virulent anthrax culture. It was a tense moment, yet Pasteur maintained his quiet resolve. He believed that his method honored the natural defenses within the animals themselves. Days passed slowly, marked by careful observations and long stretches of silence. Pasteur waited without impatience, understanding that scientific truth often reveals itself gently rather than dramatically. Soon, the results began to emerge. The unvaccinated animals showed signs of illness, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Their symptoms spread quickly, reflecting the deadly nature of the disease. Meanwhile, the vaccinated animals remained calm, eating and grazing as though untouched by danger. The contrast became clear to everyone who watched. Pasteur's method had held true. The vaccine had quietly protected the animals, demonstrating the power of controlled exposure and the wisdom of his careful approach. As visitors returned to the farm each day, they spoke in hushed voices about what they were witnessing. Some approached Pasteur with amazement, while others expressed quiet gratitude. Pasteur accepted their words with humility, reminding them that the success belonged not to him alone, but to the natural processes he had learned to understand. He emphasized that his work was simply an attempt to cooperate with nature's own rhythms, not to overpower them. When the demonstration reached its conclusion, all doubt faded. The vaccinated animals remained healthy, while nearly all the unprotected ones succumbed to the disease. The difference was undeniable, even to those who had been skeptical. Pasteur offered explanations softly and patiently, describing how weakened microbes prepared the body to defend itself. His calm clarity made the concepts approachable, helping his audience grasp the profound implications of what they had witnessed. News of the demonstration spread beyond the village, reaching scientific circles across France and beyond. Many hailed the event as a turning point in the understanding of disease, though Pasteur himself spoke modestly about the achievement. He felt a quiet joy, not because of recognition, but because the discovery could protect communities who had lived in fear for generations. His work had given them a path toward safety, achieved not through force, but through patient understanding. For Pasteur, the success at Pouilly-le-Fort marked the beginning of a new era. The principles behind the anthrax vaccine suggested possibilities far beyond livestock protection. He sensed that vaccination could extend to humans, guarding them from some of the most devastating illnesses of the time. This thought grew gently within him, filling him with both determination and responsibility. The invisible world he had studied so carefully was now offering tools to protect life in ways once unimaginable. And as Pasteur prepared to step into this next chapter, he carried with him the same calm certainty that had guided his earliest experiments, a quiet belief that careful observation and gentle persistence could illuminate even the deepest mysteries of life. Rhythm. After the success of the anthrax demonstration, Pasteur returned to his laboratory with a renewed sense of purpose. The quiet fields of Pouilly-le-Fort had confirmed what he had long suspected, that controlled exposure to weakened microorganisms could awaken a natural defense within the body. This realization did not fill him with triumph, but with a gentle humility. He sensed that he was entering a new field, one that required even greater care, precision, and responsibility than anything he had attempted before. As Pasteur began applying his methods to new diseases, he approached each one with the same calm and methodical attention. He studied the nature of the microorganisms involved, their environments, and the conditions under which they thrived. Some illnesses proved more complex than anthrax, displaying unpredictable patterns that required additional layers of understanding. Pasteur did not rush these investigations. He allowed the evidence to unfold slowly, trusting that patient observation would reveal the subtle logic behind each disease. One of the illnesses that captured Pasteur's focus was fowl cholera, a disease that struck poultry with alarming speed. He examined cultures of the responsible microorganism, comparing fresh samples to those that had aged over time. In doing so, he made a quiet but essential discovery. Older cultures lost their strength, becoming less harmful while still capable of stimulating resistance. This soft revelation echoed the principles behind the anthrax vaccine and confirmed that weakening microbes could provide safe protection across different species. To test this insight, Pasteur conducted careful trials. He exposed chickens to aged, weakened cultures and observed their responses with gentle attentiveness. The birds remained healthy, displaying no signs of illness. Later, when exposed to the virulent form of the disease, they survived without symptom. Pasteur felt a calm thrill at this outcome. It confirmed that vaccination was not limited to a single illness, but could serve as a universal principle, one that could reshape the future of medicine. As Pasteur shared these findings, he maintained the same quiet humility that characterized his earlier work. He invited colleagues to examine the evidence, to repeat the experiments, and to see for themselves the reliability of the results. Some remained uncertain, but many recognized the depth of the discovery. Pasteur's calm insistence on transparency made his work difficult to dismiss. He believed that scientific truth must always stand on steady ground, supported by evidence accessible to all. Through this period, Pasteur expanded his laboratory practices to include new sterilization techniques. He insisted on clean instruments, heat-treated materials, and careful avoidance of contamination. These habits emerged naturally from his understanding of microorganisms and became foundational for the young scientists who trained under him. Pasteur did not scold or criticize. Instead, he taught through gentle example. His presence in the laboratory created an atmosphere of respect for the invisible forces that shape life. As vaccination proved effective in more and more applications, Pasteur sensed that society was beginning to shift. Farmers, veterinarians, and physicians grew increasingly open to the idea that disease was not random, but governed by laws that could be understood and controlled. Pasteur heard stories of communities spared from devastation, of animals protected, and of livelihoods restored. These accounts touched him deeply, reminding him that science was not an abstract pursuit. It was a way of easing human fear and suffering. Yet Pasteur remained aware that the path ahead would require even greater courage. Human diseases were far more delicate to study and far more consequential. The microorganisms involved behaved differently in the human body than in animals, and the implications of error were profound. For Pasteur, this responsibility did not weigh heavily as pressure, but as a quiet, solemn calling. He knew he could not turn away from the work, even if the challenges ahead were greater than any he had faced before. In quiet moments, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point, from the small laboratory studies of crystals to the discovery of microscopic life influencing illness. Every step had unfolded slowly, guided by patience rather than speed. These reflections gave him confidence. They reminded him that progress built slowly was progress that endured. He trusted this rhythm, believing it would lead him safely into the complexities of human medicine. By the end of this stage, Pasteur sensed a new horizon forming, a place where the principles of vaccination might be applied to diseases that had terrified humanity for centuries. He felt neither fear nor urgency, only a steady sense of readiness. The invisible world had opened its doors to him, revealing patterns that could protect life in profound ways. And as he prepared to take his next step, Pasteur carried forward the same calm conviction that had guided him since his earliest studies. That careful attention, gentle persistence, and respect for nature would lead him toward the discoveries the world needed most. As Pasteur's ideas matured, he began turning his attention toward diseases affecting humans. Among these illnesses, one stood out for its severity and mystery: rabies. It was a disease that frightened entire communities, known for its sudden onset and near-certain fatality. Pasteur understood that studying rabies required both caution and patience. He approached the subject with a quiet seriousness, aware that he was venturing into unfamiliar and delicate territory. Yet he also sensed that the principles he had discovered in animals might hold the key to saving human lives. Rabies behaved differently from the diseases Pasteur had studied before. Its symptoms appeared unpredictably, and the virus moved silently through the body before revealing itself in terrifying ways. Pasteur gathered information from physicians, veterinarians, and families who had witnessed its effects. Their stories were filled with fear and helplessness. Pasteur listened gently, not promising answers, but offering hope through patient investigation. He believed that understanding the disease required careful observation of its quiet beginnings rather than its dramatic end. Since rabies affected the nervous system, Pasteur could not study the disease with the same methods he used for anthrax or fowl cholera. Instead, he observed its progression in animals under controlled conditions, working slowly to understand how the infection spread. He discovered that the virus traveled through nerve tissues rather than microorganisms freely multiplying in the blood. This realization guided him toward new experimental methods, requiring delicate handling and rigorous precision. Pasteur approached this work with humility, respecting the danger and the responsibility it carried. To develop a potential vaccine, Pasteur needed to weaken the virus without destroying it, an approach that had proven effective with other diseases. He began experimenting with infected nerve tissue, observing how the virus changed when exposed to air or dried over time. The process was slow, measured in days and weeks rather than hours. Pasteur moved through the experiment steadily, adjusting conditions with thoughtful patience. Each small shift in the virus's strength brought him closer to understanding how immunity might be created. Gradually, Pasteur discovered a method to weaken the virus through controlled drying of infected spinal tissue. He found that the longer the tissue dried, the weaker the virus became. This pattern offered a path he recognized from his earlier work, a way to build immunity through graded exposure. Pasteur felt a quiet sense of alignment as these principles came together. The invisible world, once hidden from human understanding, was now revealing its consistent patterns across multiple diseases. Testing the weakened virus required extraordinary caution. Pasteur conducted initial trials in animals, administering progressively stronger doses after an initial exposure to the weakest form. He observed the animals closely, watching their behavior, their strength, and their responses with calm attentiveness. Each successful trial strengthened his confidence that vaccination might work for rabies just as it had for anthrax. Yet he proceeded slowly, knowing that mistakes could carry profound consequences. Throughout this period, Pasteur's laboratory carried a sense of quiet intensity. Assistants moved carefully between workstations, aware of the seriousness of the research. Pasteur guided them with gentle clarity, emphasizing precision, cleanliness, and respect for the materials they handled. He believed that careful technique was a form of safety, not only for the people in the laboratory, but for the integrity of the discoveries themselves. His calm leadership anchored the team, allowing them to work with confidence rather than fear. As Pasteur refined his method, he realized that the next step, testing a rabies vaccine in humans, would require extraordinary moral courage. He understood the weight of such a decision. Human trials carried risks far greater than any he had faced with animals. Yet he knew that rabies offered no natural cure. Without intervention, the disease was almost always fatal. This quiet truth guided him forward. Pasteur did not rush. He waited, testing, refining, and thinking deeply about the responsibility he carried. By the end of this stage, Pasteur had developed a weakened virus that consistently protected animals from the disease. The vaccine appeared safe, reliable, and effective in all his trials. But he also knew that the step into human application would be one of the most delicate decisions of his life. He carried this awareness with calm reflection, understanding that science required not only discovery, but compassion and careful judgment. And as he stood on the threshold of this next step, Pasteur felt a gentle sense of readiness, not born from confidence alone, but from the patient trust he had always placed in careful observation, steady reasoning, and the quiet laws of nature. As Pasteur continued refining the rabies vaccine, he knew the moment would come when theory and animal trials would no longer be enough. The disease's devastation weighed on his mind. Families losing loved ones, physicians helpless, communities living in fear of even the smallest bite. Pasteur understood that without a human trial, the vaccine could never reach those who needed it most. This thought stayed with him quietly, reminding him of the responsibility that lay ahead. He waited with patient vigilance, never rushing the moment before it was ready. The turning point arrived when a young boy named Joseph Meister was brought to Pasteur's laboratory. He had been bitten repeatedly by a rabid dog, and the wounds were severe. Without intervention, his fate seemed certain. The child's mother stood beside him, desperate and trembling, pleading for help. Pasteur looked at the boy with deep compassion, understanding the gravity of what lay before him. He had never administered the rabies vaccine to a human, yet he knew that doing nothing would condemn the child to a slow and painful end. For a long moment, Pasteur considered the ethical dimensions of the decision. He was not a physician, and stepping into human treatment carried profound implications. Yet he also recognized that science, at its heart, was meant to serve humanity. The boy's life hung in a fragile balance. Pasteur felt a gentle resolve settle within him, calm, steady, and born not from ambition, but from compassion. He agreed to proceed, trusting the careful logic of his research and the quiet truth revealed in years of observation. Pasteur administered the weakest dose first, watching Joseph closely in the hours that followed. The laboratory fell into complete stillness, the air filled with unspoken worry. Assistants moved quietly, their footsteps soft against the floor. Pasteur remained at the boy's side, observing each minute change with steady attention. As the day passed without signs of illness, a soft hope began to grow within the room. Yet Pasteur knew the process was only beginning. The stronger doses would follow. Each step required faith in the method he had built so carefully. Over the next several days, Pasteur continued administering progressively stronger doses of the weakened virus. Joseph responded calmly to each treatment, showing no symptoms of rabies. Pasteur watched him with careful eyes, balancing caution with hope. He never allowed himself to celebrate prematurely. Instead, he honored the process with the same quiet discipline that guided all his work. Each day brought a gentle increase in confidence, supported by the boy's steady strength. As the final dose was administered, Pasteur felt the weight of uncertainty begin to lift. If Joseph remained healthy, it would mean the vaccine had protected him from the disease. Days passed slowly, each one stretching with silent anticipation. The laboratory, usually filled with activity, maintained a subdued calm. Pasteur reviewed his notes repeatedly, checking every detail of the process. His assistants, though anxious, mirrored his quiet patience. They understood that science often revealed its answers through silence as much as through action. Then, in the days that followed, the truth became clear. Joseph remained free of illness. The disease never appeared. The boy lived. This simple fact carried a profound and almost overwhelming power. Pasteur received the news with deep emotion, though he expressed it gently, without spectacle. He understood the significance of what had happened. A child's life had been saved by a method born from years of patient study and trust in the invisible world. News of the successful treatment spread quickly, reaching physicians, scientists, and communities around the world. Many responded with astonishment, recognizing that a new chapter in medicine had begun. Pasteur accepted their praise with humility, reminding them that the success belonged not to him alone, but to the laws of nature he had spent his life observing. He emphasized that vaccines worked by cooperating with the body's own defenses, encouraging it to protect itself. His voice remained calm even as the world reacted with excitement. As more patients came seeking treatment, Pasteur approached each case with the same gentle care. He understood that no two lives were the same, and each person carried fears and hopes that required compassion. His laboratory evolved into a place not only of science, but of comfort, a sanctuary where suffering met understanding. The quiet atmosphere, once devoted exclusively to experiments, now carried the weight and warmth of human stories. Pasteur honored each one with the same steady dedication. By the end of this stage, Pasteur had ushered in a profound transformation. Vaccination, once an uncertain idea, had become a tool capable of saving lives threatened by one of the most terrifying diseases known to humanity. He did not see his work as heroic. Instead, He viewed it as a natural continuation of his lifelong desire to understand and serve the world. The invisible realm he had studied so carefully had now given humanity a new form of protection. And as Pasteur looked toward the rest of his journey, he felt a quiet, enduring sense of purpose, one shaped not by fame or triumph, but by the gentle conviction that knowledge, when guided by compassion, could bring peace to even the darkest fears. As Pasteur's success with the rabies vaccine spread, his work entered a new phase defined by both recognition and responsibility. People traveled from far regions seeking help, carrying stories filled with fear, hope, and desperation. Pasteur welcomed each person with gentle calm, listening to their circumstances before offering treatment. His laboratory, once a quiet place of study, had become a refuge where science met human suffering. Pasteur moved through this environment with steady presence, understanding that compassion was as essential as discovery. Despite the growing attention, Pasteur remained grounded in his work. He continued refining the rabies vaccine, seeking ways to strengthen its safety and reliability. He kept careful records of each patient, documenting their progress with thoughtful detail. Every successful recovery deepened his confidence, while each challenge reminded him that vigilance was necessary. Pasteur believed that science must evolve through humility. He approached every new case with calm responsibility, never assuming success, always respecting the unknown. As demand increased, Pasteur realized that he needed a dedicated space to continue his research and treat patients safely. With support from colleagues, government officials, and grateful families, plans began forming for a larger institute devoted to scientific study and medical application. Pasteur envisioned a place where researchers could work collaboratively, where advanced laboratories could support new discoveries, and where those suffering from disease could receive care rooted in the most current knowledge. The idea brought him quiet hope, a home for the future of germ theory. During this period, Pasteur continued expanding his research into other infectious diseases. He studied the microorganisms responsible for diphtheria, cholera, and other illnesses that haunted communities. Each new organism revealed its nature through careful observation, patterns, and behaviors hidden in its microscopic form. Pasteur felt a familiar sense of wonder as he explored these unseen realms. The invisible world continued to unfold before him, offering both questions and solutions with patient consistency. His laboratory became a place of continuous activity, yet the atmosphere remained calm and disciplined. Assistants moved softly between tables, preparing cultures, examining slides, and recording results. Pasteur guided them with gentle precision, offering firm yet encouraging advice. He believed that every detail mattered: the cleanliness of instruments, the temperature of solutions, the timing of observations. In his view, scientific clarity grew from quiet discipline rather than hurried experimentation. Pasteur also felt a growing responsibility to share his discoveries with the world beyond his laboratory. He began giving lectures and writing papers that explained germ theory with clarity and accessibility. Although the scientific world had been slow to accept the role of microorganisms in disease, Pasteur's steady evidence and calm explanations gradually dissolved resistance. People began recognizing that cleanliness, sterilization, and preventative practices could protect families and entire communities. Pasteur spoke not with triumph, but with gentle conviction, urging society to embrace these simple measures. As he traveled to give lectures, Pasteur often observed the places he passed through: small towns, crowded cities, and rural landscapes. He noticed how illness affected communities differently, influenced by sanitation, climate, and culture. These observations strengthened his belief that health was not merely a matter of treatment, but of prevention. He envisioned a world where understanding microorganisms would allow societies to protect themselves from disease before it took hold. This vision brought him a sense of calm purpose, guiding his steps forward. During this time, Pasteur also reflected deeply on the path that had brought him here. He remembered his days as a young artist, sketching quietly by morning light. Those early lessons in careful observation remained part of him. The patience required to shade a drawing, to capture a subtle expression, had become the same patience he now used at the microscope. Science and art, he realized, were not opposites. They were parallel expressions of curiosity, each revealing hidden layers of the world. As Pasteur's reputation grew, so did admiration for his gentle character. Colleagues described him as steady, thoughtful, and compassionate, someone who carried the weight of responsibility without arrogance. Families he treated often returned years later, expressing gratitude not only for his discoveries, but for the kindness he showed during their most vulnerable moments. Pasteur accepted their words quietly, believing that empathy was simply part of being human. By the end of this stage, Pasteur's work had expanded far beyond what he once imagined. Germ theory had moved from an idea into a force-changing medicine, agriculture, and public health. Yet Pasteur remained focused on one goal: to use knowledge to reduce suffering wherever possible. He believed the invisible world once feared could be understood and used to protect life. And as he prepared for the next chapter, he carried with him the same steady heartbeat that had guided every step: quiet curiosity, gentle discipline, and a deep belief in the power of patient discovery. As plans for a dedicated research institute moved forward, Pasteur felt a growing sense of gratitude. The support he received from colleagues, leaders, and ordinary citizens revealed how deeply his work had touched people's lives. Yet he approached the development of the institute with the same calm humility that defined all his endeavors. He envisioned a place where knowledge would grow quietly through collaboration, where patients could receive care without fear, and where young scientists could learn the discipline of observing nature with respect and patience. The creation of the institute required careful planning. Pasteur spent long hours reviewing architectural proposals, laboratory designs, and safety considerations. He insisted on spaces that encouraged cleanliness, precision, and thoughtful work. Every room was imagined with intention, from sterilization areas to lecture halls, reflecting the values he had cultivated throughout his career. He believed that a scientific environment should feel ordered yet welcoming, a place where ideas could unfold gently without distraction or haste. During this time, Pasteur continued treating patients arriving from across Europe. Each case reminded him why the Institute mattered so deeply. Families carried stories marked by fear, yet Pasteur met them with calm reassurance. He listened to their concerns with steady presence, offering explanations that brought clarity rather than confusion. These interactions strengthened his belief that science and compassion must walk together. The Institute, he realized, could become a sanctuary where both principles thrived. As construction progressed, Pasteur found moments of quiet reflection. He walked along the unfinished corridors, imagining the future sounds of footsteps, lectures, and the soft hum of laboratory work. He pictured young researchers gathering around microscopes, discovering patterns hidden in the invisible world. These thoughts filled him with a gentle hope. The Institute would become more than a building. It would be a living tribute to the idea that knowledge, when pursued with humility, could protect human life. Meanwhile, the scientific community continued to evolve in response to Pasteur's discoveries. Physicians began adopting sterile practices, sterilizing instruments, and recognizing the importance of hygiene in hospitals. Surgeons washed their hands more carefully, reducing infections that had once seemed inevitable. Pasteur watched these developments quietly, grateful that the invisible principles he had uncovered were now shaping everyday medical practice. Progress moved slowly, yet consistently, mirroring the pace at which nature revealed its truths. Pasteur also worked to ensure that the principles behind vaccination remained accessible to future generations. He trained students who traveled from distant countries to study under him. They observed his careful methods, learning not only the technical skills, but also the gentle mindset that guided his work. Pasteur believed that science was not merely a collection of facts. It was a way of thinking rooted in patience, clarity, and respect for evidence. These qualities, he hoped, would continue long after his own work was complete. As the institute neared completion, Pasteur felt a mixture of anticipation and calm reflection. The building stood as a quiet statement of trust in the invisible world, a place where questions could be explored thoughtfully and where suffering could be met with understanding. Visitors walked through the halls with curiosity, sensing the promise the institute held. Pasteur welcomed each person with a gentle smile, sharing his vision of a future where disease prevention would become a natural part of human life. Despite his growing responsibilities, Pasteur remained committed to his daily routines in the laboratory. He continued observing microorganisms, refining techniques, and guiding experiments with care. These moments of focused work offered him peace, grounding him in the simple rhythms that had shaped his entire career. They reminded him that scientific progress came not from grand gestures, but from countless small steps taken with consistency and mindfulness. By the time the Institute finally opened its doors, Pasteur felt a deep, quiet fulfillment. He walked through the laboratories, listening to the soft sounds of research beginning anew. The Institute felt alive with possibility, carrying forward the principles he cherished: clarity, compassion, and the belief that understanding life's smallest forms could protect its greatest wonders. Pasteur knew that the work ahead would continue evolving long after his time, guided by the next generation of scientific minds. And as he watched the first researchers begin their work, he sensed that the invisible world he had devoted his life to was quietly welcoming them, ready to reveal its secrets to those who approached it with patience and respect. As the Pasteur Institute began its early years, it quickly became a place where quiet curiosity and disciplined practice merged into a single, purposeful rhythm. Researchers from many nations arrived with notebooks in hand, eager to learn from Pasteur's methods. They moved through the halls with a sense of reverence, aware that they had entered a space built upon decades of patient discovery. Pasteur welcomed them warmly, offering guidance with the same gentle presence he had shown throughout his life. He believed that the future of science depended on nurturing minds, not merely instructing them. Inside the laboratories, the air was filled with a calm hum of activity. Glass flasks glowed softly under lamplight, microscopes stood ready, and journals lay open beside careful drawings of microorganisms. Young scientists approached their work with quiet focus, inspired by the clarity and steadiness Pasteur demonstrated daily. He encouraged them to observe first, then conclude, reminding them that nature revealed its truths slowly, rewarding patience over haste. In this environment, mistakes were not failures, but opportunities to listen more closely to the evidence. Pasteur devoted much of his time to teaching students the importance of working cleanly and thoughtfully. He emphasized sterilization, careful preparation, and deliberate action, explaining that the smallest oversight could shape the outcome of an experiment. His guidance carried no harshness. Instead, he spoke in a tone that balanced firmness with kindness, helping each student understand the deeper purpose behind the method. To Pasteur, science was not simply a practice. It was a discipline of the mind, requiring humility and respect for the unseen. Beyond training new researchers, Pasteur continued exploring questions that had shaped his life's work. He studied the behavior of microorganisms across different environments, comparing their growth patterns in various temperatures, solutions, and conditions. These quiet experiments filled his days with a sense of familiar comfort. They reminded him of the first time he had watched yeast cells bud under a microscope, or the early moments when he realized that invisible life governed the transformations of wine and beer. Each new observation felt like a gentle conversation with nature, continuing the dialogue he had begun long ago. The Institute soon became a place where advances in medicine unfolded almost naturally. The principles of germ theory informed the development of new hygienic practices in hospitals, guiding surgeons and physicians toward safer procedures. Pasteur observed these changes with quiet satisfaction. He never sought recognition for the transformation. Instead, he felt gratitude that the work he began in solitude was now improving lives on a global scale. The growing acceptance of germ theory helped ease suffering in ways he once could only imagine. Pasteur also turned his attention to diseases affecting children, pursuing questions that weighed heavily on families. He studied infections that swept through towns, leaving parents frightened and uncertain. Though not all answers came quickly, he approached each challenge with steady perseverance. He believed that every illness had a cause that could be found, a pattern that could be understood, and a solution waiting to be revealed through careful study. His calm determination inspired confidence in those who worked beside him. As the Pasteur Institute gained recognition, visitors from distant countries traveled to meet the man whose discoveries had changed the world. Some came seeking scientific guidance. Others came to express gratitude for lives saved through vaccination. Pasteur greeted each visitor with gentle sincerity. He listened to their stories and answered their questions patiently, never rushing conversations. Though weary at times, he understood that his presence brought comfort and reassurance. Humanity's gratitude, expressed quietly and sincerely, reminded him why he had dedicated his life to this work. Meanwhile, researchers within the Institute began forming their own investigations, building upon Pasteur's foundation. They studied diseases affecting livestock, crops, and human communities, exploring the relationship between environment and infection. Pasteur supported these efforts wholeheartedly, believing that science thrived through collaboration and diversity of thought. Even as age slowed his movements, he continued mentoring younger scientists, offering advice shaped by decades of thoughtful exploration. During these years, Pasteur often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. His memories drifted back to his early sketches, his quiet school days, and the first questions that stirred his curiosity. He recognized that his path had never been linear, nor driven by ambition alone. Instead, it had been shaped by simple moments of observation, gentle intuition, and the desire to understand life's hidden patterns. These reflections filled him with a peaceful sense of gratitude. By the end of this stage, the Pasteur Institute had become not merely a building, but a living embodiment of its founder's philosophy. It was a place where discovery unfolded calmly, where suffering met compassion, and where the invisible world became a source of protection rather than fear. Pasteur saw all this with quiet pride, knowing that the Institute would continue growing beyond his lifetime. And as he stepped forward into the next chapter of his life, he carried the comforting knowledge that his work, rooted in patience, clarity, and gentle persistence, would continue guiding generations of scientists for years to come. As Pasteur grew older, the physical demands of his work became more noticeable. A previous stroke had left him with limited mobility, and his movements were slower and more deliberate. Yet his mind remained sharp, filled with the same curiosity that guided him from his earliest days of studying crystals and drawings. He approached each task carefully, reflecting on how far science had come and how much more remained to be understood. His presence in the laboratory carried a quiet dignity, reminding everyone that dedication endured even as the body grew weary. Despite his weakened health, Pasteur continued to mentor the young scientists who filled the Institute's halls. He sat beside them as they adjusted microscopes or prepared slides, offering guidance with calm clarity. They listened intently, aware that each suggestion came from decades of patient exploration. Pasteur encouraged them not to chase recognition, but to pursue understanding with discipline and humility. He believed that science advanced through steady attention, not hurried ambition. His words shaped their mindset, forming a culture built on thoughtful work. During these years, Pasteur found peace in observing the success of his students. Many began publishing their own discoveries, contributing new insights into infectious diseases and public health. Pasteur celebrated their achievements quietly, seeing them not as extensions of his legacy, but as partners in a shared mission. He felt comfort knowing that the future of germ theory no longer rested on his shoulders alone. The Institute had become a living ecosystem of inquiry, sustained by minds that he had helped nurture. Even as his physical strength declined, Pasteur remained involved in research discussions. He listened carefully to reports from ongoing experiments, asking gentle questions that encouraged deeper thinking. His presence in these meetings reminded younger scientists of the importance of patience and reflection. He often spoke about the early days of his discoveries, not to relive past triumphs, but to emphasize the value of perseverance. These conversations carried a sense of continuity, linking the past to the future in a quiet, steady arc. Pasteur also received frequent letters from families whose lives had been touched by his work. They wrote of loved ones saved by vaccines, of herds protected from illness, and of communities transformed by new hygiene practices. Pasteur read these messages slowly, absorbing their gratitude with humility. He did not view these outcomes as personal victories, but as proof that knowledge, when shared generously, could bring peace to others. These letters brought warmth to his quiet evenings, reminding him that compassion had always guided his efforts. From time to time, dignitaries and public figures visited the Institute to honor Pasteur's contributions. They praised his discoveries, celebrated his achievements, and spoke about his influence on the modern world. Pasteur accepted their words gently, acknowledging their kindness without embracing the grandeur. His heart remained rooted in the simple act of observation, the moment when a truth emerged from careful study. He believed that a scientist's greatest honor was not fame, but the chance to illuminate something hidden for the sake of others. Amid increasing recognition, Pasteur often retreated to quieter rooms of the Institute to reflect. He revisited old notes, sketches, and experiments, tracing the progression of his ideas across decades. These moments were filled with a soft nostalgia. He remembered the first time he saw microorganisms under a microscope, the early doubts he faced, and the quiet breakthroughs that reshaped his understanding of the world. These reflections brought him calm satisfaction, knowing that each step, no matter how small, had contributed to a journey that helped humanity. Though he could no longer perform demanding laboratory work, Pasteur continued shaping the Institute's direction. He guided research priorities, encouraged collaboration between departments, and emphasized the importance of ethical responsibility. His leadership style remained gentle and steady. Rather than issuing strict commands, he offered thoughtful suggestions that invited consideration. This approach fostered an environment where researchers felt supported, respected, and inspired to give their best. As the end of the century approached, Pasteur sensed the broader impact of his discoveries. Germ theory had become an essential part of medicine, sanitation practices had improved drastically, and vaccines were beginning to change the course of infectious diseases. These changes unfolded not through dramatic revolutions, but through consistent, quiet application of scientific principles. Pasteur recognized that the invisible world, once feared and misunderstood, had become a guide for protecting life. This transformation filled him with deep, peaceful fulfillment. By the end of this stage, Pasteur understood that his life's work had already begun to outgrow him. The Institute stood strong, filled with dedicated researchers, evolving methods, and a culture rooted in careful observation. He was comforted by this continuity, knowing that the future of discovery lay in the hands of those he had taught. For Pasteur, this was the greatest reward, a legacy not of fame, but of shared inquiry and lasting impact. And as he looked toward the final chapters of his life, he carried with him a gentle certainty that patient curiosity, compassion, and respect for the unseen had shaped a journey that would continue guiding science long after he was gone. As Pasteur entered the final phase of his life, he began spending more time at home with his family, surrounded by the people who had quietly supported his work for decades. His wife, Marie, remained his closest companion, offering encouragement during moments of uncertainty and sharing in the steady rhythm of his days. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the home with soft conversations and gentle laughter. These moments brought Pasteur a peaceful comfort. After years of intense scientific dedication, he welcomed the simplicity and warmth of family life. Yet even in this quieter period, Pasteur's mind continued to explore the unseen world that had shaped his entire career. He read scientific journals brought to him by colleagues, discussing new discoveries with the same thoughtful curiosity he had always possessed. Though he could no longer work at the laboratory bench, he remained deeply engaged intellectually. The invisible realm of microorganisms still fascinated him, its patterns, behaviors, and delicate rhythms forming a constant source of reflection. His family often found him lost in thought, his eyes soft with contemplation. During these years, Pasteur also revisited the challenges he had faced earlier in life. The skepticism, uncertainty, and moments of isolation that accompanied his earliest theories. He did not remember them with bitterness, but with gratitude. Each obstacle had strengthened his resolve and taught him the value of patience. He understood that discovery rarely arrived easily. Instead, it unfolded slowly, shaped by persistence and trust in evidence. These reflections helped him appreciate how far both he and the scientific world had come. Visitors continued to arrive at his home, some seeking guidance, while others hoped simply to meet the man who had transformed modern science. Pasteur welcomed them gently, offering warm conversation from his chair by the window. He spoke softly, choosing words that conveyed humility rather than authority. Many left feeling as though they had encountered not only a brilliant mind, but a deeply compassionate human being. Pasteur believed that kindness was as essential to science as intelligence, for both shaped how discoveries touch the world. Though his body grew weaker, Pasteur found strength in observing the progress of the Pasteur Institute. Letters and reports from researchers filled him with calm satisfaction. They described new experiments, breakthroughs, and collaborative projects inspired by his work. Pasteur saw these developments as signs that the Institute had become a living force, an ongoing expression of curiosity and care. Knowing that others continued to build upon his foundations brought him a quiet peace that deepened with each passing day. Pasteur also spent time reflecting on the broader transformation germ theory had brought to society. Hospitals adopted sterilization protocols, families practiced improved hygiene, and public health measures grew increasingly effective. Illnesses that once spread unchecked were now understood, controlled, and sometimes prevented entirely. Pasteur saw these changes not as personal achievements, but as evidence of humanity's capacity to learn. The idea that invisible organisms shaped life had once been dismissed. Now it guided medicine across the world. This shift filled him with gentle hope for the future. As the seasons passed, Pasteur found joy in the simple beauty of nature. He enjoyed watching light move across the yard, listening to the sound of wind in the trees, and observing the quiet patterns of daily life. These moments reminded him that science and nature were deeply intertwined. The same forces that guided the growth of plants and the movement of animals also governed the invisible world he had devoted his life to understanding. This connection brought him a sense of unity, a peaceful awareness that everything, seen and unseen, followed the same delicate order. Often, as evening settled over the home, Pasteur shared stories with his grandchildren. He spoke of his early fascination with drawing, his first experiments, and the moments when small details revealed great truths. He encouraged them to remain curious, to ask questions gently and persistently. His stories carried no sense of grandeur. Instead, they reflected the quiet path that had guided his life. The children listened with wonder, sensing the depth of their grandfather's wisdom without fully understanding the breadth of his accomplishments. By this stage, Pasteur felt a soft acceptance of his mortality. He did not fear the end of his journey. Instead, he embraced it as part of the natural cycle he had observed throughout his life. He trusted that the Institute would continue growing, that science would keep uncovering truths, and that generations of researchers would carry forward the compassion and curiosity he valued. This belief brought him comfort, allowing him to meet each day with peaceful gratitude. And as he approached the final chapter of his life, Pasteur held close the understanding that his journey had always been guided by something gentle and enduring, a deep desire to understand the unseen forces that shaped life, and to use that understanding to alleviate suffering wherever he could. As Pasteur's strength continued to wane, he found himself reflecting more deeply on the human stories intertwined with his scientific work. He remembered the frightened families who had arrived at his laboratory seeking help, and the quiet relief that washed over them when recovery became possible. He recalled the farmers grateful for vaccines that protected their herds, and the physicians who embraced new hygiene practices that saved lives. These memories brought him a sense of warmth. They reminded him that the purpose of science was not simply to understand the world, but to care for it. In his conversations with family, Pasteur often spoke about the delicate relationship between knowledge and compassion. He believed that scientific discovery carried meaning only when it served to reduce suffering. He encouraged his children and grandchildren to approach life with gentleness, reminding them that patience and empathy were as valuable as intellect. These quiet discussions shaped the atmosphere of his home, creating a space filled with reflection rather than urgency. Pasteur's presence offered a steady, comforting example of a life lived with purpose and humility. Visitors continued to seek Pasteur's wisdom, and though his energy fluctuated, he welcomed them with the same calm kindness he had always shown. They came from universities, hospitals, and distant countries, bringing questions about emerging scientific challenges. Pasteur listened attentively, offering guidance rooted in principles that had shaped his entire career. Observe carefully, question gently, and trust evidence above assumption. His humility often surprised guests. Despite his monumental achievements, he spoke as though he were still a student of nature, continually learning from its subtle patterns. As his physical limitations increased, Pasteur spent more time in quiet contemplation. He often sat near a window overlooking the garden, watching the slow movement of sunlight across the grass. The world outside reminded him of the delicate balance of life, how every leaf, every breeze, every shift of shadow followed laws both visible and invisible. These gentle scenes mirrored the work he had done in the microscopic realm. The patterns he had studied in microorganisms echoed the patterns he now observed in nature, forming a peaceful symmetry that soothed him. During this period, Pasteur also revisited the pages of his old notebooks. He traced the careful sketches, calculations, and observations that marked the earliest stages of his discoveries. The worn ink and faded lines carried memories of long hours in quiet laboratories, moments of uncertainty, and the gentle thrill of understanding something new. These notebooks felt like companions from another time, reflecting a journey that had unfolded not through sudden breakthroughs, but through patient, attentive work. This realization brought him deep contentment. Despite his declining health, Pasteur remained involved in decisions concerning the Institute. He met with colleagues to discuss research priorities, offering insights shaped by decades of careful investigation. His suggestions were always delivered softly, framed as possibilities rather than directives. Researchers respected his perspective, sensing the weight of experience behind every thought. Even in his frailty, Pasteur continued to guide the Institute with the same thoughtful steadiness that had defined his leadership from the beginning. As the world continued to evolve, Pasteur took comfort in knowing that his discoveries had sparked new lines of inquiry. Germ theory had inspired surgeons to adopt antiseptic methods, public health officials to improve sanitation, and scientists to explore fields once considered unreachable. Pasteur saw these developments as proof that knowledge, once revealed, could grow beyond its original boundaries. He felt gratitude that he had been able to contribute a small piece to the vast mosaic of human understanding. This perspective allowed him to face each day with serenity. In his final months, Pasteur's home became a space of gentle rhythm. Family members moved quietly through the rooms, offering support while respecting his need for rest. They brought him letters, books, and reports from the Institute, keeping him connected to the work he cherished. Pasteur responded with soft smiles and thoughtful words, grateful for their presence. Even as his body weakened, his spirit remained calm and resolute. He faced the passage of time with acceptance, trusting in the continuity of the world he had helped illuminate. By the end of this chapter, Pasteur sensed that his life was nearing its close, yet there was no fear in his heart, only a profound sense of completion. He felt at peace, knowing that the principles he had devoted himself to would continue shaping the world long after he was gone. His work had been a conversation with nature, carried out with patience and respect. Now he prepared to let that conversation rest, confident that others would listen and learn in their own time. And as he moved gently toward the final stage of his journey, he held close the quiet truth that had guided him since the beginning, that even the smallest forms of life, when understood with care, could reveal the deepest wisdom about the world. As Pasteur entered the final years of his life, he spent more time at his family home in Villeneuve-l'Etang, a peaceful estate surrounded by quiet gardens and gentle pathways. The natural stillness of the place brought him comfort, allowing him to reflect on the long journey that had shaped both his life and his understanding of the invisible world. He often sat near the lake, watching ripples form on its surface and thinking about the delicate patterns that governed all living things. These moments connected him to the same sense of wonder that first inspired his scientific curiosity. Despite his frail health, Pasteur continued to meet with close colleagues who visited him regularly. They brought reports from the Institute, updates on new research, and questions seeking his perspective. Pasteur listened carefully, offering thoughts with the same measured calm that had guided his work for decades. His voice was softer now, yet his insights carried the same clarity and depth. These conversations reassured him that the scientific spirit he cherished would endure long after he was gone, carried forward by minds eager to understand nature's quiet logic. When he was strong enough, Pasteur enjoyed short walks through the grounds, supported by a family member or assistant. The gardens bloomed around him, flowers opening to sunlight, insects moving through leaves, and the slow rhythms of the natural world unfolding without urgency. He observed these small details with the same attentiveness he once gave to microorganisms under his microscope. Nature's patterns, large and small, felt connected to him, he found peace in knowing that the same laws shaped all life, weaving a unity he had spent his life exploring. At home, Pasteur also enjoyed moments of gentle conversation with his wife Marie, who remained his constant source of support. She read to him, prepared notes he dictated, and helped organize correspondence from the Institute and from families he had helped. Their companionship had been a quiet foundation throughout his career, and now it offered him daily comfort. Pasteur often expressed gratitude for her steady presence, recognizing that without her partnership, many of his discoveries might never have reached the world. As the years progressed, Pasteur grew increasingly reflective. He thought often about the early days when he first questioned accepted theories, the moments when doubt surrounded him, and the steady rise of understanding that followed. He remembered long hours in dim laboratories, the thrill of subtle discoveries, and the calm certainty that emerged when evidence revealed a hidden truth. These memories filled him with gentle satisfaction. They reminded him that his work had never been about recognition, but about listening to nature's quiet voice. Visitors who came to see him often found Pasteur surrounded by books, letters, and scientific notes. Though he could no longer conduct experiments, he continued to study new findings and maintained an active interest in the evolution of germ theory. Researchers shared results from around the world, vaccination campaigns, sterilization methods, and public health reforms influenced by his discoveries. Pasteur read these accounts slowly, feeling a deep sense of peace. The invisible world he had once struggled to illuminate was now guiding global efforts to protect human life. In these final years, Pasteur experienced moments of profound emotion. Sometimes he felt overwhelmed by the knowledge that his work had shaped generations, yet he always responded with humility. He reminded his visitors that discovery belonged to everyone who sought truth with patience and sincerity. He saw himself not as a hero, but as one observer among many who had listened carefully to nature's subtle instructions. This perspective grounded him, allowing him to remain connected to the essence of his calling. As evening settled over the estate, Pasteur often rested by the window, watching the fading light soften the landscape. Shadows stretched across the fields, and the world seemed to quiet itself around him. These gentle scenes brought him comfort. They echoed the same calmness that had guided his experiments, the slow unfolding of truth, the soft clarity that came with careful observation. In these quiet hours, Pasteur felt a deep gratitude for the life he had lived, the questions he had pursued, and the purpose that had carried him through every challenge. By the end of this stage, Pasteur understood that he was nearing the final steps of his journey. Yet his heart remained steady. He did not fear what lay ahead. Instead, he felt a serene acceptance rooted in years of learning, questioning, and caring for others. The world he was leaving behind had changed in ways he once could only imagine, shaped by ideas that had grown from his humble observations. This awareness filled him with a peaceful certainty that his life had served a meaningful purpose. And as he prepared for the last chapter, Pasteur carried with him the quiet conviction that had guided him since the beginning, that understanding the invisible world brings light to the visible one, and that patience, compassion, and curiosity were the true tools of discovery. In his final months, Pasteur spent much of his time surrounded by family, their presence offering him a steady sense of comfort. His children and grandchildren visited often, filling the home with gentle laughter and soft conversation. Pasteur listened with a peaceful smile, appreciating the warmth of these moments. Though his body had weakened, he still felt deeply connected to the world through the love of those around him. These quiet gatherings reminded him of the simple joys that had accompanied him throughout his life, grounding him in gratitude. One of Pasteur's greatest comforts came from hearing updates about the continued work of the Institute. Colleagues wrote to him regularly describing new discoveries, improved vaccination techniques, and expanding research projects. Pasteur read each letter slowly, savoring the knowledge that the Institute had grown into a thriving center of scientific progress. He felt a calm pride knowing that its purpose extended beyond his personal efforts. It was a living institution shaped by many hands, guided by the same values he had devoted his life to nurturing. When colleagues visited in person, Pasteur welcomed them with gentle curiosity. They spoke about emerging theories in microbiology, public health challenges, and the evolution of scientific methods. Pasteur listened attentively, offering reflections grounded in decades of experience. His insights carried a softness, never forceful, always encouraging deeper thought. Visitors often left feeling inspired, sensing that they had not only consulted a brilliant scientist, but also encountered wisdom shaped by humility and compassion. Pasteur's thoughts frequently returned to the countless individuals who had benefited from his discoveries. He remembered the children saved by vaccinations, the farmers whose herds survived outbreaks, and the countless patients protected by improved hygiene. These memories brought him a sense of fulfillment, not because of personal achievement, but because they reflected the meaningful purpose behind his work. He believed that each life touched by science represented a quiet victory, not for himself, but for humanity's ability to understand and protect itself. As his strength diminished, Pasteur experienced longer periods of rest. During these quiet hours, he often gazed through his window at the changing light across the garden. Seasons shifted gently, leaves turning, breezes moving through branches, birds gliding across the sky. These scenes carried a peaceful familiarity. They reminded him that life moved in cycles, that growth and decline were natural rhythms woven into existence. Observing them brought him a sense of serene acceptance, echoing the same gentle patience he had applied to every scientific question. In moments of deeper reflection, Pasteur considered how the invisible world had shaped his life. What began as curiosity about crystals and fermentation had grown into an understanding that microorganisms governed processes far larger than themselves. This realization had changed the course of medicine, agriculture, and public health. Yet Pasteur saw these achievements not as his own triumphs, but as revelations from nature itself. He believed that nature offered wisdom to anyone willing to observe with patience, respect, and humility. Toward the very end, Pasteur surrounded himself with the people who meant the most to him. His wife remained by his side, offering quiet support as she had throughout their life together. Their bond, strengthened by years of partnership, provided him with deep comfort. Pasteur often expressed his gratitude to her, acknowledging the essential role she played in helping him pursue his work. Their final conversations were tender, filled with shared memories and the calm understanding that their journey together had been meaningful. As Pasteur's life drew to a close, the atmosphere in his home grew still and reflective. Family members gathered nearby, offering soft words and gentle care. There was no fear in the room, only a sense of peace shaped by the knowledge that he had lived with purpose, curiosity, and compassion. Pasteur faced the final moments of his life with the same quiet courage that guided his scientific discoveries. He trusted in the natural order of things, knowing that he had given all he could to understanding and protecting life. On the evening of his passing, the world lost one of its most devoted observers. Yet Pasteur's influence did not fade. His discoveries continued in laboratories, hospitals, and homes across the globe. His institute carried forward the values he cherished: patience, precision, and care for others. And the invisible world he had illuminated continued shaping human health and understanding, its mysteries now more accessible because of his work. And so, Louis Pasteur's life came to a close in gentle quiet, marked not by fanfare, but by gratitude. From those he helped, those he taught, and those who would follow his path. His story became a reminder that even the smallest discoveries, pursued with humility and compassion, can reshape the world for generations to come. As the years passed after Pasteur's death, the institute he founded entered a period of quiet yet profound growth. Researchers continued exploring the microscopic world he had revealed, driven by the same gentle persistence that had shaped his life. New diseases emerged, and new questions arose, yet the institute approached these challenges with calm confidence. The principles Pasteur had taught, patience, observation, and respect for evidence, remained at the heart of every investigation. His presence lingered in the halls, not as a shadow, but as a soft, guiding light. In the early decades of the 20th century, scientists at the Institute carried forward Pasteur's legacy with disciplined curiosity. They developed vaccines for illnesses that had haunted families for generations, applying the same logic of weakened exposure that Pasteur pioneered. Each new discovery unfolded slowly, shaped by careful experiments and shared insight. The Institute became a sanctuary for thoughtful work, where researchers approached problems not with urgency, but with the calm intention of understanding. This environment allowed breakthroughs to emerge naturally, like seeds growing in fertile soil. As global travel increased, outbreaks spread across borders more quickly than ever before. Yet the Institute responded with steady dedication, tracking the behavior of microorganisms and advising public health officials with clear, measured guidance. Their laboratories studied patterns of transmission, adapting methods to new environments and evolving pathogens. Pasteur's influence remained unmistakable. His belief that knowledge must be used to protect communities echoed through every decision. Even as the world changed around them, the values he instilled remained constant and grounding. Over time, the Institute became a beacon for young scientists from all over the world. They traveled to Paris seeking mentorship, hoping to learn not only the technical methods Pasteur had inspired, but the quiet discipline that guided them. Researchers studied under mentors who had learned directly from Pasteur or from those trained in his tradition. These generations formed an unbroken chain of shared wisdom. Each scientist carried a small piece of Pasteur's approach, his patience, his humility, and his gentle trust in the rhythm of nature. As the Institute expanded, its work began to touch fields Pasteur never lived to explore. Researchers investigated viruses, genetic inheritance, and the complex interplay between human behavior and disease. Though the tools grew more advanced, the underlying philosophy remained the same: observe carefully, think slowly, and let evidence guide each step. The invisible world continued revealing its secrets to those who approached it with respect. Through these discoveries, Pasteur's influence reached far beyond microbiology, becoming a foundation for modern medicine. The quiet revolution Pasteur had begun in hospital hygiene also continued to spread globally. Countries adopted sterilization practices, improved water systems, and launched campaigns to educate communities about sanitation. Each reform signaled a shift in humanity's understanding of health, an understanding rooted in germ theory. Pasteur's simple message that tiny organisms shaped life in profound ways became a universal truth. This knowledge saved countless lives, often without fanfare. Families never knew the extent of the protection they received, yet their safety was shaped by insights born decades earlier in Pasteur's small and quiet laboratories. Within the Institute, portraits and handwritten notes from Pasteur served as reminders of the spirit behind the work. Researchers often paused to read his old notebooks, finding inspiration in the simplicity of his observations. He had approached the unknown not with boldness, but with attentiveness. This mindset reminded scientists that discovery was not about racing toward answers, but about listening patiently to what nature revealed. These reflections brought a gentle humility to the laboratories, grounding each new generation in the values that had shaped the Institute's earliest days. The Institute also became a place of compassion, just as Pasteur had intended. Patients arrived seeking care for diseases that had once been fatal, and they were met with understanding and respect. Doctors and researchers worked together, blending scientific insight with empathy. Treatment rooms carried a soft atmosphere of reassurance, mirroring the calm that Pasteur had shown when comforting frightened families. His belief that science should heal not only the body but the human spirit lived on through the work of those who continued his mission. As the decades unfolded, the world faced new challenges: wars, epidemics, and shifting political landscapes. Yet the Institute remained steadfast, focusing on the timeless priority of understanding and protecting life. Scientists worked through nights during outbreaks, developed treatments under intense uncertainty, and coordinated with global partners to contain new threats. Through every crisis, the calm principles Pasteur laid down proved their strength. His legacy endured not because of fame, but because of the lasting clarity of his ideas. In moments of reflection, those working at the Institute often thought about the man who started it all. They imagined him walking slowly through the halls, offering quiet guidance, encouraging patience over haste. Though many had never seen him, his presence was felt in the culture he created. They honored him, not through grand ceremonies, but by upholding the values he cherished: careful thinking, steady work, and compassion for those who turn to science for hope. In this way, Pasteur remained alive through every discovery. Outside the Institute, Pasteur's influence continued shaping society. Education systems taught children about microbes, vaccinations, and hygiene. Families began understanding the importance of washing hands, storing food safely, and protecting children from preventable diseases. Each piece of knowledge filtered quietly into daily life. This subtle shift in awareness, this simple trust in the invisible, had been one of Pasteur's greatest hopes. He believed that understanding brought empowerment, and the world gradually embraced that belief with confidence. As the modern age arrived, new technologies allowed scientists to see the microscopic world with unprecedented clarity. Electron microscopes revealed structures Pasteur could never have imagined, mapping viruses and molecules in astounding detail. Genetic sequencing unlocked the code of life itself. Yet even in these advanced fields, researchers found themselves returning to Pasteur's core principles. They understood that technology provided tools, but wisdom came from careful observation and respectful curiosity. The invisible world still demanded patience. Today, the Pasteur Institute stands as a testament to the gentle force of a single life devoted to understanding. Its research spans continents, its discoveries shape global health, and its mission reflects the same compassion that guided Pasteur's hand. Through its efforts, millions are protected from disease each year. Vaccinations continue saving lives quietly, often without people realizing the lineage of knowledge that makes their safety possible. Pasteur's work lives on through each life, safeguarded by the science he helped create. In classrooms, textbooks, and quiet laboratories across the world, Pasteur's name is spoken with respect, not as a distant figure of history, but as someone whose ideas continue breathing life into scientific progress. Students study his methods, learn from his mistakes, and draw courage from the humility he embodied. They see in him a reminder that discovery is not about grandeur. It is about curiosity, perseverance, and a willingness to follow small clues toward deeper truths. His story becomes a compass for those who seek understanding. Even beyond the realm of science, Pasteur's life carries a gentle lesson. He demonstrated that compassion and intellect are not separate paths, but complementary ones. He showed that the smallest details, a crystal's angle, a yeast cell's movement, can reveal truths that reshape the world. And he proved that patience, when guided by intention, can uncover answers that rush and force will never reach. His journey reminds us that insight emerges quietly, like dawn arriving without sound. Louis Pasteur's life unfolded slowly, shaped by careful observation, disciplined curiosity, and a deep desire to help those who suffered. From his earliest studies to his final days, he listened to the invisible world with humility and respect, allowing it to show him the answers hidden within its patterns. His discoveries transformed medicine, protected millions of lives, and gave the world a new understanding of health and disease. And though he is gone, the calm spirit of his work continues guiding scientists, physicians, families, and communities. His legacy lives not in monuments, but in every life saved through knowledge, and in every quiet moment when understanding holds the power to protect.